Into the Unknown, a podcast dedicated to exploring the mysteries of the universe, with your host, Jason Stokes. Okay, so this is Into the Unknown, official episode number 1. Today we're going to be talking about telepathy, and we're joined with two special guests, Ryan Leslie, who is the author of the Beginning of the End series, including River and Fate, and our personal accountant and publisher and many other things, Anna Ray. So we'll start off with Ryan. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I am Ryan Leslie, but everybody knows me as the Witch. I do write young adult dark fantasy, like extremely dark fantasy, erotic horror, and poetry. And I am fascinated by this subject, personally. But I do not claim to have any secret power about it.
Do you have any powers that aren't a secret?
No, they're all secret. I do have a secret power. I do, but we're not going to talk about that. No, we're not going to talk about it. People would not find it very fun. I'm just saying.
Maybe that's the subject of a different episode. Anna, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Anna Ray, Jason Stokes' wife, and I do accounting, some editing, and just general morale for Gestalt Media. And in my spare time, I do stained glass art, and I love refurbishing antiques. I'm interested in this subject, and I really don't know anything about telepathy, to be honest, other than just the general idea about it. But it's something that I'm interested in learning more about, and I've always found it fascinating reading stories or seeing movies that include that, and it's just kind of an interesting subject.
So there was an article that was in Smithsonian Magazine. You can find it at smithsonianmag.com. And essentially, the Harvard Medical School published findings trying to find a basis for telepathy, to recreate scientifically what might be happening between two people's minds naturally or unnaturally, however you choose to view it. So the test involved putting sensors on the heads, the brains of the
test subjects.
I don't know, the people who are involved with the test, and sending those signals through an internet connection or through email in this particular case, and having them picked up on the other end. And the person on the other end was actually able to receive the message and understand what they were hearing or what they were thinking in this particular case. So I guess we can start there. What are your thoughts on that? And what are your thoughts on telepathy in general? Do you feel like there might be a way to recreate this particular, I guess what we call power, but it's not really like a superpower or anything of that nature? Do you think that it's possible that we might be able to duplicate that scientifically one day?
Who wants to go first? Anna, you want to go first?
It is a really interesting concept. It's kind of like they're taking all the facets of AI and really turning it up a notch going into this. Unless I've seen it in person or seen exactly how the test was, I would have to say I'm a little skeptical. But I just really don't know what to say about it.
Well, I personally think it's utter bullshit.
Awesome. Interesting. So you think the concept of telepathy itself is complete bullshit?
I think that them wiring up to another person and sending something across the internet is utter bullshit. I think that there are some people who are more open to receiving things, but I don't believe in telepathy itself, no. Our brains are not wired like that. And if you've met someone who, claims to be telepic, who claims to have this superpower, I call bullshit on it. And they would have to really work to impress me with that. Just like when someone says they're clairvoyant, yeah, no, I'm not believing that either, which is funny since I'm a witch, but I just call bullshit on it.
Cool. All right. Well, that actually brings up a really interesting point, because in both River and Fate, which you wrote, I presume, but your characters actually use telepathy. So what was your impetus behind using that particular power?
Well, they don't. It's not that they can't read each other's thoughts. They can whisper thoughts into someone else's mind who has an open mind. It doesn't work for everybody. But River can't read Wolf's thoughts. She can put a thought into his head, which I call whispering. But there are only two characters in my series that can actually hear other people's thoughts, and it's by total accident. One person, who I can't give the character away, he can, if he's standing near somebody who whispers to somebody else, he hears exactly what they're saying, which should be impossible. And then another character can hear anybody's thoughts he's standing near, or if he's even touching them, he can hear their thoughts. And it's kind of a fluke. It wasn't supposed to happen, and it's a gift that he stole from another species, from another world. So it's not even supposed to be on Earth. But they can't read each other's minds. I had to have limitations on it because, again, I wanted it to be believable, but not so outrageous. Plus, have you ever written like inner dialogue, someone listening to somebody else? I mean, I have to do it for this one character, and it gets quite tedious.
So in your world, when they talk to each other, when they're able to hear what the other one's thinking or implanting thoughts in the other one's head, how do you imagine that functions? What's the mechanics behind that?
Well, the mechanics is the humans merged with the three species of the ebb. And before that, the humans obviously didn't have any powers or gifts. And the mermaids, dryads, and imps had different gifts, but it wasn't like whispering into someone's head. Like the dryads were very open to all the essence around them, so they could feel emotion, they could taste emotion. It wasn't thoughts per se, it was more like the essence. And so when I merged the humans with the species of the ebb, it created what would be birth defects. And so it's just an accident. Some of the new species of the ebb can suddenly receive thoughts or send thoughts. And, that never happened before, but it's really like a birth defect. Very simple. The bodies were not supposed to mix together. And a human body can't hold power, but then you put a man with a dryad, and all of a sudden they create a child, and that child will get all of the gifts of the mother and then the stability of the human. And so it creates these weird birth effects that they didn't know was going to happen, and the whispering is one of them. If that explained it.
So, magic.
Yes.
Okay.
Power.
I guess that's fair. I mean, it's fiction. We can do whatever we want.
Hell yeah.
So I would like to touch on is, and I believe you've read some of these articles before you came on. There was a series in Psychology Today. Well, it was kind of breaking down the different situations that might explain where this phenomenon comes from, if it even exists, and looking for different explanations for maybe it's something else entirely, or it's just something that we don't understand yet. So I believe it was 2005, there was a biologist that ran a series of over 500 trials that had people trying to guess what the other one was thinking. And what they found was that they ended up with a much higher percentage of correct answers than would be expected with, I want to say 40%, slightly higher.
Yeah.
Whereas a control group, about 25%, I believe is what you would expect. So they did show that there was a much higher level of recognition than was expected. And this has been repeated over and over again, where the mind's ability to pick up on a signal, no matter where it's coming from, has been recorded, at least scientifically. But we still don't know where it's coming from. One of the suggestions was that people are reacting to subtle cues. And so basically there's a social component in which we're not actually reading the other person's mind. We're not actually hearing the words that are coming across, but that we're picking up on their mood and their general attitude.
Yes.
Based on a million little things that are going on that the brain can process, but that consciously you wouldn't be able to gather all at once, that you would never be able to understand what you were actually perceiving. So it may come across as being, somewhat phenomenal and paranormal in that particular situation. So I'm assuming you would lean more towards that explanation.
Well, yeah, and it's just all coincidence. I mean, our bodies have that built-in sort of sixth sense where we immediately meet someone, we immediately judge them, we immediately have the fight or flight. What do we do? Is this going to be okay? We have kind of like that animalistic instinct in us to make sure the situation is not dangerous. And you do pick up on cues from people. And of course, the older you get, the easier that is for you to do that. And if I happen to guess what you're thinking, it's just going to be from the cues. Otherwise, it's coincidence. I can't read your mind, and you can't read mine. As much as I wish that was true, that I'm very disdainful of people I recently met a witch who claims to be psychic, and I'm very disdainful of that because she's making a living off of this, and she's using other people's need for closure or questions or answers, and she's using that and profiting off of it. And I don't think that's right.
Well, definitely. If you know that what you're doing is illegitimate, then profiting, that's just taking advantage of people, and you're right. Now, if you actually believe that, I mean, that puts you in a different category, don't you think?
No. Anybody can believe anything, whatever you do. I am always a skeptic. Even with the shit that I've seen in my life, I am very skeptical. God, I can't even talk tonight. Skeptical. I am very doubting. I'm very jaded. You would have to do a lot to make me think that you have any sort of telepathy and you can read my mind. I mean, I've met a lot of people in my life, and not one of them have I ever thought, I feel like they're gifted a little bit. No, not like that. Do you believe in that?
Well, I don't know. I'd actually like to bring up a particular subject. So we've covered that it's possible that if people are in the same room, then maybe they're picking up on just subtle cues, like you said, or they're getting impressions, but they're definitely not hearing words in their head, and they're definitely not reading somebody's mind. But there's a lot to go on. Well, for instance, have you ever thought about someone and then they just called out of nowhere? Or you notice those little tiny coincidences where you were thinking about something and then somebody in a complete different location just happened to be thinking about the same thing. You're like, I want a milkshake today. And then whoever you're with happens to bring one home, and they're like, I had that feeling that you would want this. Does that fall under the social cue territory, or does that enter into something else?
No, that falls under who knows you and who knows what you want. I always have dreams about my older brother, and they always involve tornadoes. Randomly, because we lived in Texas and we had a lot of tornadoes, lived in Oklahoma and Texas, and me and my mom and my brother love to watch tornado shows, storm chasers, whatever. And so occasionally I'll have a dream about tornadoes and he's with me in it. And I'll send it on the group text. I had a dream last night, and he'll be like, "Oh my God, so did I." Now that, that's a little hard to explain. But again, we're so close and alike. The odds are he did have a dream like that. Or, you know what I'm saying? I just don't think that um, it's possible. I mean, when the warrior comes home, he knows if he walks in the door and there's no candy in his hand, then he knows that I'm going to get upset. And he knows as he's coming home that she's thinking about candy. I know she is. I know she wants it. So I'm going to stop off at CVS and I'm going to get candy, bring it home. But that's just because he knows me. I mean, give me an example to where you believe that someone has proven this to where it's unarguable. You can't fucking argue it at all. Give me an example.
We always can argue it because we haven't been able to reproduce it. And that's where the viewpoint of skepticism really has a foothold, is that we haven't been able to reliably reproduce those results. There's been enough that would make you question. There's been tests that have been inconclusive or tests that have shown promise, but something like this is going to take a massive unveiling. It's going to have to be without a doubt before anybody's going to respect it. And so we don't know.
But see, you just explained it. You just explained it right there. Okay, in this day and time, we don't have any hard evidence. They've done tests and they put out there the idea and the thought of it. So of course people are going to go, well, that could happen. And then they get these tests with these percentages and people are going to believe it. But in this day and time, they still don't have any concrete evidence. Why? Because it doesn't exist. So I just don't understand how people buy into it. I really don't. It's fun to think about. It's fun to write about. It's fun to picture it. But I don't, for me personally.
Okay. And I do have a rebuttal for that. But in the meantime, Anna, do you have anything to add so far?
Yeah, it's just something that I always like to have facts and proof, and at this time I haven't had any experience or anything that has proved telepathy to me at all. Like in the past, there was a friend of mine that we grew up together and spent so much time together, spoke with each other every day, and it would almost seem like we were telepathic because we could complete each other's sentences. But I think that was all just because we'd spent so much time and we communicated all the time. It was just something easy for us. And also when someone calls you at the exact same time you were thinking about them, it's easy to explain. To me, it's someone that you know, and of course, from time to time, you're going to be thinking about them, and they, in turn, at the same time as well. But all these tests, I don't really agree with the findings on a lot of them. I feel like it's all due to chance and guesswork and whatnot. I'm great at taking tests because I'm good at guessing at things. It doesn't mean that I'm educated in those things. But I would love to be proved wrong. I think it would be awesome. It would also be a nightmare in some senses if you knew what other people were thinking. But it would also be kind of cool in other senses of it.
Well, definitely. There's some people I don't want to hear from. Right. We covered the spam filter in a previous episode, but if they're beaming thoughts right into your head, I'm opting out on the spot. But I do want to play devil's advocate here because, well, that's what I do. So you said that you don't believe that it's possible because in this day and age we still don't have any proof. But until recently, even the subject of pheromones, which is something we know to be true now, something we know to be a fact, wasn't believed. Science didn't accept the fact that it was possible to be picking up specific scents that had more or less had a evolutionary response. So we had a response to encoded in these smells. They actually didn't believe that we had receptors for them until science advanced to a point that we were able to locate them. There are receptors in your nose for pheromones. This is, pretty much accepted now. So my question is, animals use this, we've discovered, in large groups, that they'll emit a scent, a specific pheromone, and it will communicate to the other animals over large distances a specific message. And this actually happens with ladybugs, that they can emit a scent that is smelled over a mile away.
Yes.
And all the other ladybugs in the area, when they smell that, they know exactly what that message is. The message is that they've found a safe place to go. And so then that's why you'll see swarms of ladybugs in warm weather. And that scent actually remains for a long time. And bees have been known to engage in behavior like this as well. And my question is it possible that we just don't understand the type of message that's being sent out? Because we know a lot about brainwaves, and we were talking on a previous episode about electromagnetic interference and fields, magnetic fields. And if messages are being sent on a wavelength that we can't detect, well, then we would have no way to prove that until we were able to understand that wavelength, that specific carrier of the message itself. But just as a proof of concept, don't you think it is possible?
No, there's a difference between hearing someone's thoughts and scenting. There's a huge difference. And we're not like animals. There's a huge difference between that. And, we've always known that, while scientists are trying to prove that whole scent thing, I think everybody kind of accepted that, especially farmers and people that work out with animals and stuff, knew that this was a normal thing. But again, there has been no concrete, nothing that can say that someone else is reading your mind. Now, back to the cues, like if I'm out somewhere and I see something that I know, I can look at the warrior and I can give him a look and he knows exactly what I'm thinking. But again, and he'll like either smile or he'll turn away because, it's like funny. But again, that's just because we've been together for so long and you've been together so long, you kind of become the same person. So that's all it is. There's just no way. I don't think that it would be okay if that happened. We have our thoughts, our private thoughts are supposed to be private for a reason. If everyone knew the real shit we were thinking, don't you think that'd be a little dangerous?
I definitely think you could get in trouble pretty fast.
Yeah.
You would be in prison.
Yeah. Totally. People would run away from me afraid. I'm just saying.
Well, thought crime would be a whole new thing, and I'm sure it would open up an entirely different can of worms.
Yeah, definitely.
So
definitely.
We're getting up pretty close to about 30 minutes, which is usually how long these go. So let me ask you, let's just go into Fantasyland. What would it take to convince you that something like this was possible? Like if you were to suspend disbelief, what kind of evidence would it require before you would be willing to think about it as a possibility?
A stranger walking up to me and saying something that I'm thinking exactly, without me knowing them, without sitting there staring at me, without trying to feel me out and ask me questions, just walk up and go, oh, by the way, I don't think that's a good idea. And know what I'm thinking word for word. That is the only way that you're going to convince me. Don't be guessing.
I think we've established thus far that if anybody were to walk up and know exactly what you were thinking, the prudent for action would be to run away.
Just saying. Just saying. That's
But short of that, word for word. So you just want to see the evidence.
Yeah, you got to give me hard evidence.
Okay. And any closing thoughts?
It would be the exact same for me. Maybe sit down at a restaurant and order what I want for dinner for me, and then I might believe you.
That's a good one.
Now, is this somebody that you know personally or somebody you just met?
No, it would need to be a complete stranger.
So if a complete stranger makes a lucky guess, you'll believe in telepathy.
Yeah.
Well, that's a lot easier because I'm not sure I want to even know what Ryan thinks about, let alone say it out loud.
It's always dominating. It's always dominating people. I don't know why it happens. And someone walks by and I'm like, yeah, I could do that. Yeah, oh my God, yeah, we need to do that. Yeah, so I'm sure it would be like a wave of people just backing up. That wouldn't work. That wouldn't work.
All right, well, I mean, I think those are actually very fair points because with a lot of the stuff that we talk about, there's not a lot of hard evidence. That's why we like to think about it. That's why we like to talk about it and explore whether we think there's any truth to it, whether we think there's any basis for it. Personally, I would like to think that some of these specific, I guess you call them abilities or powers, maybe not to the extreme that you see in movies, but I would like to think that there are possible, or that through the use of science, we might learn how to manipulate technology to mimic them. So that's something I would really like to see. Whether or not it exists already and whether or not it occurs naturally, I can't claim to have firsthand experience. I can't say one way or another, but I would like to keep an open mind on that. That being said, I would also like to open it up to anybody who's listening who has a personal story that they'd like to tell or an opinion that they would like to share. We keep that open. So we have an email address, and it's going to be in the description. So it is info@gestalt-media.com. And if you have an opinion or a story that you'd like to tell, send that over to us. And if you'd like to be a guest on the show and talk about your own experiences with telepathy or telekinesis or, I mean, anything in the world, well, don't even bother sending the email. Just beam it right on over, and we'll talk about it. So until then, I guess that's a good place to wrap up. If either of you guys have anything else to say on the matter?
I think I'm good. It was fun talking to you guys.
Absolutely. These things are always very fun. It's just more of a impromptu conversation than anything else. I've really enjoyed it.
Definitely.
Into the Unknown is a production of Gestalt Media.